I was sitting in my apartment carefully wrapping the beautiful silk scarf I had picked out for my mom's 55th birthday when my phone buzzed. The text from my stepfather Bob made my heart stop. "Don't come to your mother's birthday. No one wants you here anyway. You're a total failure." I stared at the message, my hands trembling as I looked around my living room filled with receipts and confirmation emails scattered across my coffee table. What Dad didn't know was that I had paid for everything. And I mean everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever had to make a tough decision about toxic family members. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe because this story has a twist that even I didn't see coming. Trust me, you will want to stick around for this one. My name is Marlene, and at 28 I thought I had finally figured out what family meant. I work as a marketing manager for a tech startup here in Denver, and I have been fortunate enough to build a career that lets me take care of the people I love. But looking back now, I realize I was taking care of people who were taking me for granted. My mom, Linda, raised me as a single mother until I was 16. Those years were tough, but they taught me the value of hard work and independence. When Bob came into our lives, everything changed for the better, or so I thought. He was kind, funny, and most importantly, he loved my mom in a way that made her smile again after years of struggling alone. Bob didn't just marry my mom, he embraced me as his daughter. He walked me down the aisle at my high school graduation when I received the valedictorian award. He taught me how to change a tire and balance a checkbook. For 12 years I called him Dad without hesitation, and he called me his daughter with pride. I genuinely believed we were a family in every sense of the word. The relationship between Bob and me was built on mutual respect and genuine affection. He supported my decision to go to college out of state, even though it meant taking on student loans. When I graduated with honors and landed my first job, he was the first person to call me and congratulate me. When I got promoted to manager last year, he took me and Mom out to dinner to celebrate. I felt like I had won the family lottery. But 2 years ago, everything shifted when my baby sister Skylar was born. I was over the moon about becoming a big sister at 26. I thought it would bring us even closer as a family. I immediately started buying baby clothes, setting up a college fund for her, and spending every weekend helping Mom with diaper changes and midnight feedings. However, Bob's attitude toward me began to change in ways that were subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. He started making comments about how I was just the stepdaughter whenever family photos were being arranged. He would introduce Skylar as his real daughter in conversations where I was standing right there. When relatives asked about his children, he would mention Skylar first, and then add, "and Linda's daughter from before," when referring to me. The comment stung, but I told myself he was just adjusting to being a new father at 52. I made excuses for him, believing that his behavior was temporary stress from having a newborn in the house. I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, if I was more understanding and supportive, things would go back to how they used to be. What hurt most was how these changes affected family dynamics. Bob began making decisions about family gatherings without including me in the conversation. Last Christmas, he planned the entire holiday celebration and forgot to ask about my schedule. When I mentioned that I had already made plans to host dinner at my place like we had done for the previous 3 years, he told me that things were different now, and that they needed to focus on making Christmas special for Skylar. I found myself trying to prove my place in the family in ways I never had to before. I started paying for more family expenses, thinking that if I contributed financially, I would feel more secure in my role as daughter. I covered the cost of family dinners, bought groceries when I visited, and paid for entertainment when we went out together. It became a pattern where I felt like I had to earn my seat at the table. Mom tried to stay neutral during these shifts, which I understood but also found incredibly isolating. She was caught between her husband and her daughter, trying to keep peace while navigating her own adjustment to having a new baby. Linda would often pull me aside and assure me that I was still her priority, but she never addressed Bob's behavior directly. Her silence, while understandable, felt like acceptance of the way he was treating me. 3 months before Mom's birthday, I decided to plan something spectacular. I wanted to show our family that, despite the tension and changes, I was committed to being the daughter who brought joy and celebration to important moments. This party was going to be my way of proving that I belonged, that I was an essential part of our family unit. I started by researching venues and found Rosewood Restaurant, an upscale establishment downtown that specialized in private dining experiences. The ambiance was perfect, elegant but warm, with exposed brick walls and crystal chandeliers that created exactly the sophisticated atmosphere I wanted for Mom's special day. I booked their private dining room for 15 people, knowing that would accommodate our extended family and a few close friends. The cost was significant, $2,400 for the room rental, 3-course dinner and premium bar service. But I didn't hesitate. This was my mother's 55th birthday, and I wanted her to feel like royalty. I put down a $500 deposit that the restaurant clearly stated was non-refundable within 72 hours of the event. Next, I contacted Sarah Williams, a photographer whose work I had admired on social media. Sarah specialized in family portraits and event photography, and her portfolio showed exactly the kind of warm, candid moments I wanted to capture. We discussed the vision for the evening. She would arrive early to take photos of the setup, capture the surprise moment when Mom walked in, and document the evening with both posed family shots and natural moments throughout dinner. Her fee was $800 with a $200 deposit required to secure the date. For the cake, I went to Sweet Sensations, a bakery known for custom creations that were as beautiful as they were delicious. I worked with their head decorator to design a 3-tier masterpiece: Mom's favorite flowers, peonies recreated in buttercream frosting with delicate gold accents, and a message that read, "Celebrating 5 decades of amazing." The cake alone cost $450, but seeing the sketch of their design, I knew it would be the centerpiece that made Mom's eyes light up. The floral arrangements were my next priority. I contacted Aurora Blooms, a florist who specialized in elegant event decor. We planned centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus for each table, with uplighting to create a warm glow throughout the private dining room. I also ordered a special arrangement for the gift table and balloon displays in Mom's favorite colors, soft pink and cream. The total for flowers and decor came to $350. To ensure the evening had the perfect soundtrack, I hired Marcus Thompson, a DJ who came highly recommended for intimate family celebrations. Marcus understood that this was not a dance party, but rather a dinner where music would enhance conversation and create atmosphere. He would provide background music during cocktails, and dinner with the capability to adjust volume and mood throughout the evening. His services cost $600 with a $150 equipment deposit required up front. My total investment in Mom's birthday celebration was approaching $5,000, but every penny felt worth it. I had been saving for months, putting aside money from each paycheck specifically for this event. In my mind, this wasn't just a party, it was my declaration of love and commitment to our family. However, 1 week before the birthday party, tension came to a head during what should have been a simple planning meeting at Mom and Bob's house. I had brought over the final timeline and wanted to go through the evening's schedule with everyone. The private dining room was reserved from 6 to 11 p.m. Photos would begin at 5:30, and dinner would be served at 7:30. As I explained the details, Bob's expression grew more and more disapproving. Finally, he interrupted me mid-sentence. "This is ridiculous, Marlene. You are going completely overboard with all this fancy nonsense. Your mother doesn't need some expensive restaurant and professional photographer to have a nice birthday." I tried to explain that I wanted Mom to feel special, that she deserved to be celebrated in style, after all the years she had worked hard and put everyone else first. But Bob was not interested in my reasoning. "You are just showing off your money," he said, his voice getting louder. "Linda doesn't need all this fancy stuff. She would be just as happy with a home-cooked meal and a store-bought cake. This whole thing is about you trying to prove something, not about what your mother actually wants." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Everything I had planned, every detail I had carefully considered, was being dismissed as selfishness rather than love. I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment and hurt. "I am doing this because I love Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want her to have a beautiful memory, something special that shows how much she means to all of us." "No," Bob shot back. "You are doing this because you want everyone to see how much money you can spend. You want to be the star of the show, the successful daughter who can afford fancy restaurants and professional photographers. This is not about Linda at all." The conversation escalated quickly from there. Bob accused me of not understanding what family really meant, of thinking that money could replace genuine relationships. He suggested that my gesture was actually selfish, designed to make everyone else look bad by comparison. I left their house that evening feeling completely deflated. The excitement I had felt about surprising Mom was replaced by doubt and hurt. Bob's words echoed in my head as I drove home. Was I really being selfish? Was this party more about me than about Mom? But as I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by all the confirmation emails and receipts, I decided that Bob was wrong. I knew my own heart and my motivations. This celebration was my way of honoring the woman who had sacrificed so much for me, who deserved to feel cherished and valued. I was not going to let Bob's negativity derail something that came from a place of genuine love. The text message arrived at 2:30 in the afternoon on Friday, exactly one day before Mom's birthday party. I was in the middle of confirming final details with the restaurant when my phone buzzed. Seeing Bob's name on the screen, I expected maybe a logistical question, or perhaps even an apology for our argument the week before. Instead, I read words that felt like a punch to the stomach. "Don't come to your mother's birthday tomorrow. No one wants you here anyway. You're a total failure." I stared at the message for a full minute, reading it over and over, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. But there it was in black and white, a complete rejection from the man I had called Dad for 12 years. My hands were shaking as I tried to process what this meant. Not only was I being uninvited from my own mother's birthday party, but Bob was delivering this news in the cruelest possible way. The word failure kept repeating in my mind. After everything I had accomplished in my career, after all the ways I had tried to contribute to our family, he saw me as nothing but a failure. I immediately called Mom's phone, desperate to understand what was happening. Was this Bob's decision alone, or did Mom agree with him? The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again 5 minutes later and again 15 minutes after that. Each time voicemail. Either her phone was turned off or Bob had convinced her not to answer my calls. Sitting in my living room, I looked around at the evidence of my preparation for this party. Receipts were spread across my coffee table like painful reminders of my investment in a family that apparently did not want me. The confirmation email from Rosewood Restaurant was still open on my laptop. The gift I had wrapped for Mom sat on my kitchen counter, the beautiful silk scarf that I had chosen, because it was the exact shade of blue she wore to my college graduation. The more I stared at these reminders, the more my sadness transformed into anger. I had spent months planning this celebration. I had invested nearly $5,000 of my own money. I had arranged my work schedule, turned down plans with friends, and dedicated countless hours to making sure every detail was perfect. And now Bob thought he could simply send a text message and erase all of that. But as I sat there, a different kind of clarity began to emerge through my anger. This was not really about the party or the money. This was about respect, about being valued as a family member, about basic human decency. Bob's message revealed how he truly saw me not as his daughter, not even as a person deserving of kindness, but as someone whose feelings were completely disposable. I realized that I had been trying so hard to prove my worth to people who had already decided I was worthless. I had been paying my way into a family that was charging me admission, but never actually granting me membership. The thought that crystallized everything was this: if I was not family enough to be included in Mom's birthday celebration, then my money was not family enough to pay for it either. I walked to my laptop and opened up all my confirmation emails. Rosewood Restaurant, Sarah Williams, Photography, Sweet Sensations, Bakery, Aurora Bloom's Florist, Marcus Thompson, DJ Services. Each email represented a piece of the celebration I had envisioned, and each vendor was expecting to deliver their services tomorrow evening. But why should I pay for a party that I was not even allowed to attend? Why should I fund a celebration where the guest of honor had apparently agreed to exclude me? Why should I make Bob look like a generous host when he was using my money to create that illusion? My first call was to Rosewood Restaurant. When the event coordinator answered, I could hear the busy dinner rush in the background. "Hi, this is Marlene Patterson calling about the private dining reservation for tomorrow evening under Linda's 50th birthday party." "Yes, of course. Is everything okay with your reservation?" "I need to cancel the entire event," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. There was a pause. "I'm sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, since this is less than 72 hours before your event, the $500 deposit is non-refundable. But I can cancel the remainder of the charges." "I understand about the deposit," I replied. "Please cancel everything else." As I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of loss and relief. $500 was a lot of money to lose, but keeping that reservation would have cost me my self-respect. Next, I called Sarah, the photographer. Her phone went to voicemail, so I left a message explaining that the family event had been canceled, and I needed to cancel her services for tomorrow evening. I knew from our contract that canceling less than 48 hours before the event would cost me the $200 deposit, but I was beyond caring about money at this point. The bakery was my most difficult call because I knew the cake was already finished. When I explained that I needed to cancel the pickup, the woman on the phone was sympathetic, but explained that custom cakes could not be refunded once completed. I told her I understood and that she could dispose of the cake or donate it, whatever worked best for them. Marcus, the DJ, was actually relieved when I called. He had received a last-minute request for a wedding reception the same evening and had been disappointed that he couldn't take the booking. My cancellation allowed him to accept the more lucrative job, though he kept the equipment deposit according to our agreement. The florist was the only vendor able to stop the order completely since the arrangements had not yet been created. Aurora Blooms agreed to refund the full payment, which at least meant I would get back $350 of my investment. When all the calls were finished, I calculated my losses. Between non-refundable deposits and cancellation fees, I had lost over $800. But somehow those losses felt like freedom rather than punishment. Now came the hardest part, responding to Bob's message. I typed and deleted probably 10 different responses. Part of me wanted to write a long explanation of how much his words had hurt me, how unfair his treatment had been, how much money I had just lost because of his cruelty. Another part of me wanted to match his meanness with meanness of my own. But finally I settled on something simple and direct. "You're right, Dad. Cash matters more than your kid. Just canceled everything, even the restaurant deposit you can't get back. Happy birthday to Mom." I turned off my phone after sending that message, knowing that the consequences of my actions would start hitting Bob and Mom within hours. Part of me felt guilty about potentially ruining Mom's birthday, but a bigger part of me felt finally free from trying to buy my way into acceptance. Saturday evening arrived with strange quietness in my apartment. Instead of getting dressed for an elegant dinner party, I ordered Chinese food and settled in to watch old movies. Every time I thought about checking my phone, I resisted. Whatever chaos was unfolding at the restaurant or at Mom and Bob's house, I was not going to be drawn back into drama that I had not created. What I learned later through Mom's tearful phone call 2 days after her birthday painted a picture of confusion and disappointment that Bob had not anticipated when he sent that cruel text message. The family had arrived at Rosewood Restaurant at 6 o'clock, dressed in their finest clothes, and expecting to be led to a beautifully decorated private dining room. Instead, they were met by a confused hostess who had no record of their reservation. Bob insisted there must be a mistake, that his stepdaughter had made arrangements for a party of 15 people. After checking with the event coordinator, the hostess explained that the reservation had been canceled the previous day by the person who had made it originally. Bob's face, according to Mom, went white when he realized what had happened. Not only was there no private dining room, but there was no table available for their party of 15 on a busy Saturday night. The photographer Sarah had also received my voicemail and canceled her session. She had actually driven to the restaurant first looking for our party before checking her messages and learning that the event no longer existed. With no restaurant reservation and no backup plan, the family had to retreat to Mom and Bob's house for an impromptu celebration. Mom described it as chaos, people standing around in formal clothes in their living room, trying to figure out what to do for dinner. They ended up ordering pizza and eating it off paper plates while still wearing the elegant outfits they had chosen for a fancy restaurant dinner. There was no professional photographer to capture memories, no custom cake to mark the milestone, no carefully planned atmosphere to make the evening feel special. Most significantly, there was a missing daughter, and everyone knew exactly why I was not there. Mom's phone call came on Monday evening. I had finally turned my phone back on that morning and seen dozens of missed calls and text messages, but I had not been ready to engage with the fallout until I heard from Mom directly. "Marlene," she said when I answered, and I could hear that she had been crying. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied, though my heart was racing. "Bob told me what he said to you about not coming to my birthday, and I saw your response about canceling everything." She paused, and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. "I didn't know he was going to send you that message. I had no idea he was planning to uninvite you." This revelation hit me almost as hard as Bob's original text. "So you didn't agree with his decision?" "Of course not," Mom said emphatically. "You're my daughter. I would never want you excluded from my birthday or any other family celebration." When Bob told me what he had done after we got home from the disaster at the restaurant, I was angrier with him than I have ever been in our marriage. I felt a complex mix of relief and renewed hurt. Relief that Mom had not wanted me excluded, but hurt that she had not intervened to prevent it, or even called to warn me what was happening. "Mom, why didn't you call me when he sent that message? Why didn't you tell him he was wrong and demand that he invite me back?" There was a long pause before she answered. "I was trying to keep peace in the house, especially with Skylar being so little. I thought maybe I could convince him to change his mind without it becoming a big fight. I didn't realize he had been so cruel in his message to you until after everything fell apart." We talked for over an hour that night. Mom explained that Bob had been struggling with feelings of insecurity since Skylar was born. He worried that he was not a good father, that he was too old to be starting over with a baby, that he was not providing enough financially for his new daughter. In his mind, my success and generosity highlighted his own perceived shortcomings. "That doesn't excuse what he said to you," Mom was quick to add. "Nothing excuses calling you a failure or telling you that no one wants you around. But I think his anger came from his own fears, not from anything you actually did wrong." "I understand that he might have been struggling," I replied. "But I needed my family to protect me from his struggles, not sacrifice me to them. I needed you to tell him that he was wrong when he decided to exclude me." Mom cried as she acknowledged that she had failed me in that moment. She had been so focused on managing Bob's emotions that she had not protected her daughter from the consequences of his insecurity and resentment. The conversation with Bob came 2 days later. He called while I was at work, and I almost sent it to voicemail, but something told me that avoiding this conversation would not make anything better. "Marlene," he said when I answered, "I owe you an apology." "Yes, you do," I replied simply. "I was wrong to send you that message. I was wrong to exclude you from your mother's birthday. And I was especially wrong to call you a failure when you have accomplished so much and been so generous to our family." I waited for him to continue, not ready to make this easy for him. "The truth is, I have been feeling like a failure myself lately," Bob continued. "Having a new baby at my age, worrying about being a good father to Skylar, feeling like I cannot provide for her the way you have been able to provide for all of us. When I see how successful you are, how easily you can afford things that I struggle to pay for, it makes me feel inadequate." "So you decided to make me feel inadequate instead?" I asked. "I guess I did," he admitted. "And that was selfish and cruel. You have never done anything to make me feel bad about my situation. You have been nothing but generous and loving to our family, including Skylar. I took my own insecurities out on you, and I am deeply sorry." The apology felt genuine, but I was not ready to simply forgive and forget. "Bob, for 12 years you treated me like your real daughter. When you married Mom, you told me that I was gaining a father, not just a stepfather. But the minute you had a biological child, I became disposable to you. That is not something I can just get over." "I understand," he said quietly, "and I know it will take time for me to prove that I can do better. But I want you to know that you are my daughter, not just my stepdaughter. Biology doesn't change the 12 years we have been family, and it doesn't change how much I love you." Over the following months, Bob and I worked to rebuild our relationship. It was not easy and it was not quick. We established new boundaries around how conflicts would be handled in the future. Bob agreed to come to me directly if he had concerns about family dynamics, rather than excluding me or talking about me behind my back. I agreed to be more open about my feelings instead of trying to prove my worth through grand gestures. The experience taught me that love without respect is not really love at all. It taught me that sometimes you have to be willing to walk away from people who take you for granted, even when those people are family. And it taught me that my worth is not determined by how much I can afford to spend on other people. Most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself is not selfish even when it disappoints people you care about. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to show them the consequences of taking you for granted. Today, my relationship with Bob is different than it was before, but it is more honest. He no longer sees me as a threat to his role as father to Skylar, and I no longer feel like I have to buy my way into family acceptance. Mom and I are closer than ever, because she now understands that protecting your child sometimes means challenging your spouse. We celebrated Mom's 56th birthday this year with a quiet dinner at home cooked together as a family. There were no professional photographers or custom cakes, but there was something more valuable, genuine appreciation for each other and respect for everyone around the table. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to stand up for yourself with family members? Have you found yourself trying to prove your worth to people who should have valued you automatically? Let me know in the comments, because I think so many of us have been in situations where we had to choose between keeping peace and demanding respect. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories about family relationships and finding your worth. And remember, when you know your value, you will never settle for less than you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is show people the consequences of taking you for granted. Because when you know your worth, you will never settle for less again.